A strange spiralling white light was spotted in the early morning sky over Sydney, with even sceptical witnesses wondering if it was a UFO.
They were last seen on the beach with a tall man, and that's the best description police have ever had of him.
More than 17 years after Harold Holt disappeared into raging surf at Cheviot Beach, his widow has finally revealed his last romantic words.
Shocking, terrifying, mesmerising. That's the way a number of Australians have described their alleged encounter with the Yowie.
It's time for the Weird Crap in Australia podcast.
Welcome to Weird Crap in Australia. I'm your host, Matthew Soul, and joining me is intrepid researcher Holly Hunt.
G'day, g'day.
So, we're about to wrap up our very first series, which is the true stories behind the Wolf Creek film franchise. But in order to really put a nice little bow on this package, I thought it would be prudent to go through one of the devices that horror films use so often that they're nearly meaningless, and that is the title card. You know what I'm talking about? We're talking about things like
Based on true events.
Based on true events, or this is what happened to this character, or this is this statistic, things like that. And that was really why I wanted to do this series in the first case, because I like to debunk things. Now, what we're going to find is some of the title cards that were featured pretty prominently in the first Wolf Creek film are actually far more horrifying than I expected, but we're going to address all of them. The first one that we're going to take a look at is the title card right at the start. So the first one that we're going to approach is the following is based on actual events. Now, I think if you've listened to every single episode we've done so far, we can say this is plausible. We can say that this is definitively plausible.
We don't know, however, whether we're reflecting real-life events onto the film or if the filmmakers actually knew about these. We know they knew about two of them because they've openly admitted it. But the other two, you never know.
I will do my very best to reach out to the director and writer. I think it's one in the same. I will do my very best to reach out to them and maybe be able to get them on the show so we can actually discuss exactly how accurate mine and Holly's predictions have been, or research, however you want to see it. So the first title card that comes up is 30,000 people are reported missing in Australia every year, which I thought was bullshit. The truth is, however, Holly,
the average for the 7-year period between 2008 and 2015 was almost 40,000 people get reported.
Which is insane. Now, you've looked a little bit into these statistics, Holly. Do you want to throw some numbers at us?
Alrighty, let me just break out my statistics busting tools. One person in Australia is actually reported missing every 15 minutes. So these can be people of every age, however. So we're not just talking kids, or we're not just talking backpackers. We're talking kids that wander off at the swimming pool. We're talking dementia patients who somehow manage to get out of wards. We're talking about people who are suicidal and just walk away.
Did you, not to cut you off there mid-thought, that just reminded me of a story recently. There was a dementia patient in the US, I believe. He escaped and ended up rocking out at a metal concert.
That wouldn't surprise me. They would have been drawn to the lights and the noise. And
yeah, I know.
People.
It's really hard. You got to make sure you keep your old person contained. If they see bright lights, they will go out to explore those bright lights. Very similar to a
cat with a laser pointer.
Or a moth. You know, we have to contain the old person.
99.5% of people who go missing in Australia are found. However, that still leaves 0.5% who are never found or are lost long term, which is classed as more than 6 months. In 2013, 11,803 people went missing in New South Wales. August 4, 2014, I found a report saying 36 of those people were still missing.
So that's not a bad success rate, though, when you think 11,000 people are reported missing in just the state of New South Wales alone. for them to whittle it down to 36 still missing, that's not...
I didn't say alive.
Oh.
Just, yeah, not all of the people who are found alive, but they are found, so they count in the statistics.
Oh.
It's a really good solve rate until you realize sometimes they get there a bit late.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking about finding the murdered victims or wherever they happen to...
The suicide victims, the kids who accidentally walk into a dam and drown, that kind of thing. So, not quite as happy as you feel.
Yeah, but that's New South Wales. The idea that a lot of people end up in the hands of a serial killer out in the outback, there aren't that many people out in the outback, are there? So I would assume that the numbers for, say, Western Australia would be a lot lower than New South Wales.
Because of the spread of Western Australia and Northern Territory's population, including a lot of Aboriginal communities, most people who go missing out there don't get reported because Aboriginal people have a long-held distrust of white man, white authority, all that, whatever you want to tag it. So they're not going to tell people that they're going missing. You also have the people who go walkabout or who go out on their farm and shoot themselves and no one realizes for a year when the harvest doesn't get brought in. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the isolation which leads to people in the outback. And that's what we're trying to do a little bit in this episode. We've done the serial killer stuff. And so this episode, we want to maybe demystify Australia a little bit and demystify the outback. Because the feeling that you wander into the outback and you don't come out is not necessarily the case, though it is probably one of the most, I would say not dangerous, but it has the potential to fuck with your day just because of how isolated it is.
Yeah, I actually have a analogy that people could probably understand when it comes to isolation in the outback. Remember Titanic, when the ship starts sinking and it zooms out to the Titanic in the middle of the sea and then just blackness? That is being in the outback. It is one person in 100 miles.
That's your second Titanic reference today.
What was the other one?
I think we were discussing Infinity War and you brought up Titanic. Why do you have Titanic on the brain?
Because the book I'm reading, one of the characters is reading The Night to Remember.
Ah. And for our listeners, what is A Night to Remember?
It's the true story researched of the Titanic sinking.
There you go. That's why it's on your brain. That makes sense now.
Okay, so I have some yearly breakdowns of long-term missing for the last 5 years. In 2005, 2006, roughly 35,000 people were reported missing and more than a quarter of them had a mental health issue. So they were schizophrenic, they were suicidal, bipolar, dementia, all those kind of stuff. August 2014, 684 people were reported missing for longer than 12 months. 431 of those were declared dead without a body.
Wow.
So, yeah. Those would be suicidal people and things like that, people they don't expect to find. However, it is possible that a lot of those declared dead without bodies were actually trafficked, which is unfortunate.
Oh, so that's sex trafficking, I would assume.
Yeah, if you're declared dead without a body, the circumstances have to be that it looks like that you would be dead, so you were picked up by someone and never seen again. You walked into a bush and were never seen again. All that kind of stuff. However, a lot of those circumstances can also lead to people being declared dead when they're actually being smuggled out of the country.
See, and this is just this is probably plays into my naivete a little bit here. I was more than well aware that sex trafficking is a major problem in Europe, major problem, of course, in the Middle East with ISIS. And of course, America has pretty rampant sex trafficking. I just didn't think we were big enough that we could be a potential hunting ground for sex traffickers, but I'm sure we could be. I'm sure we offer exactly the same thing that any other country offers when it comes to sex trafficking.
Well, when it comes to sex trafficking, what happens a lot is that people get catfished.
Yep.
And when they show up for stuff, they get bundled on a plane or a bus or whatever, and they're just gone.
So you're talking about people who are like, oh, I'm going to meet this lovely, handsome, tall and dark stranger who has been telling me all these wonderful things on the internet. Uh-oh, I've just been chucked into a sack and thrown into a van.
Yeah, stuff like that.
A little less cartoonish than how I described it.
Yeah, but those events are pretty much it. Yeah.
We'll have to do an episode on sex trafficking in Australia as well. That will be depressing.
That's not weird. We're meant to be looking at weird stuff, not depressing stuff, Matthew.
I think the last 4 episodes have been very depressing.
Which is why I feel we need to go back to weird.
Okay, so yeah, the 364 people not recovered in the year of 2015. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. In 2016, the number of long-term missing people jumped to 2,000 before skittering back down to 1,600 in 2017.
Jesus. It's just getting worse and worse, isn't it? See, this was one of those things where, like, I've been completely proven wrong just by the research that we've done. I made a lot of assumptions about Wolf Creek and I just assumed it was a massive marketing gimmick. I really did. And these numbers are just blowing my mind. They really are.
There is almost parity in numbers between males and females missing. Males tend to go missing more through mental illness or dementia, whereas females tend to go missing assumed kidnapped and things like kids running away. 120 cases of dementia sufferers went missing in 2013. Only one of them still wasn't found in August 2014, so at least if you're old and you have a bad brain, they'll find you, mostly.
Most of the time, except for this one poor unfortunate individual in 2014. The thing about it is, too, that with certain technologies now, there are these smartwatches that they have very basic capabilities, but they're marketed for school kids these days. But what they are, they offer a GPS tracker so that you can actually track the person wearing the watch, gives them the time, of course, and it gives them a very basic call function. So you can actually call them through the watch. Very, very interesting. But I assume as more of that sort of technology is used, especially with people who suffer from dementia, we are going to see those numbers start to decrease, or at least you won't have people unaccounted for.
At least in the older generation, if you're being kidnapped, the first thing they're going to do is break that watch.
Yeah, of course.
35%, about 35% of missing person cases are actually of someone who's gone missing more than once, which usually includes people who are running away from home, so usually teenagers, or those with dementia, drug problems, and suicidal tendencies. So, yeah, a lot of people go missing more than once. There are a lot of myths about missing people that once they've gone missing once, you can't report them again. You absolutely can. Even if they go missing within a 24-hour period of being found, you can report them missing again.
And make sure you do.
Address that for people.
Make sure you get that missing report out as soon as you can. The police now utilize Facebook and they utilize Twitter to offer alerts. Facebook now uses the Amber Alert system in Australia, which you can opt into. So we have the technology there to track people and get people back to their homes as soon as possible. So very important. That's a very good point you raised, Holly. I don't know. I think a lot of people would be like, okay, we just reported them missing. They've come back. They're gone again. Should we report them missing again? Can we report them missing again? It's great that you've answered that question.
And you don't have to wait 24 hours to report them, okay? If you think they're missing and you have a reason to assume that they will not be coming back anytime soon, absolutely report them missing. Don't leave it 24 hours. A lot can happen in 24 hours.
I would assume that this is similar for most countries around the world, but what we're talking about...
No, there are some that you do have to wait 24, 48, 72 hours.
Really?
In the Ukraine, I listened to a podcast the other day. Ukraine have a mandatory 72-hour wait period.
Jesus.
And because of that, the guy was killed.
Jeez. Doesn't America, they have a 24-hour minimum as well?
Yes, they do, which is why I'm telling you right now, in Australia, you can do it as soon as you believe that person is not coming back. Do not wait.
There you go.
And the police don't mind if they turn up 20 minutes later, it's fine. It's better than them having to deal with a homicide or a suicide.
Very true. Very, very true.
Okay, so we'll move on a little.
That's a little public. I didn't think we'd do a public safety, but we did, so that's great.
I figured in this, it's something that the police are actually pushing a lot on Facebook, so I figured that we'd better actually, we're talking about missing people, so we might want to spread this a little bit as well.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. 60% of people who go missing in New South Wales are under the age of 18. So those are girls running away to be with their older boyfriends, those kids who have drug problems. Those are just kids who hate their parents.
Domestic violence sufferers as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, I remember thinking about running away a few times when I was a kid, but I never actually did it. I'm sure there are a lot of people who... You did it or you thought about doing it?
I did it. I ran away from home.
How long did that last?
An evening?
Yeah, it doesn't really last that long.
What happened to me, this is actually quite funny. I was maybe 5 or 6. There was something going on. I think I was stirring my brother and sister, and there was some sort of fight. I can't remember it too distinctly, but I remember Mum basically like putting me in my room and like, stay here, you're in trouble. And so I decided not to do that. I was going to go to my grandmother's house. So I had to walk, and this was, we're talking about 7, maybe 8 o'clock at night. So I had...
In the 90s.
In the 90s. Yeah, it was fine in the 90s. There was no crime in the 90s. So I walked, I'm just trying to work it out in my head. I think it would be about 7 or 8 blocks that I walked, maybe more. And as I was headed towards my grandmother's house, I remember seeing there was a figure across the road from me. And I was doing my best to sort of stay hidden, because my plan was, because I was in trouble with Mum, I would go to my grandmother's house. And it just happened to be that the person walking on the other side of the road was one of my cousins. And he found me and then took me to my grandmother's. And then my grandmother obviously took me back home, much to the relief of my very, very worried mother. But yeah, I did manage the old runaway. So there you go.
I remember scaring the shit out of my grandmother the first day of high school.
What'd you do?
Well, the first day of high school, we finished at 10 to 3, and then the second day it was sport day, so we actually finished at 2:30. I stood around for 10 minutes thinking that she wasn't going to show up, and then eventually started walking home. The problem was she didn't realize that's what I'd done, and she was freaking out trying to find me. She found me down the end of our street. I got almost the whole way home before she found me.
That's a habit that you've gotten into over the years, is doing something out of the ordinary and then no one can get in contact with you. Mm-hmm.
Well, then I don't know why you're surprised anymore.
So, yeah. Anyway, I have run away, and Holly is notorious for disappearing, and we have to track her down again.
Ginger ninja.
Apparently.
Okay, so we said 60% went missing or under 18. Over 10% are over 60.
That's your dementia sufferers and just your elderly who get all elderly confused and end up wandering about.
The other 30% are people between the ages of 18 and 60. Those are definitely your drug affected, your drunk, fallen down in a park, your domestic violence runaways, things like that. Aboriginal women tend to be a lot more represented in that 30% than any other age group, though there are a lot of men that are missing.
And just again for our international listeners, the Aboriginal people are our native people here in Australia.
Well, Aboriginal literally means native.
I just like to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Well, if I turned around and called them Koori, then you'd have to worry about it. And no, that's not a slur. That's what they call themselves.
Some of the...
Before anyone jumps on me.
Isn't it some of the tribes call themselves Kooris, but not all of them?
Go down to the Australian National Museum, turn around and look at the building behind you, and it literally has the word Koori written on it.
Okay.
So I'm allowed to use that one.
Hey, no, I'm not doubting you. Technically.
No, I'm saying that to the listeners. I'm allowed to use that one. Specific population groups were identified during an Australian Institute of Criminology report. Those children under the age of 12, young people aged 13 to 17 with a known vulnerability, persons with a mental illness, expressing suicidal intentions and those with dementia and intellectual or physical disability, or those who go walking about without their life-saving medication.
Which is a lot.
I do have to stress that last one.
Which happens more often than you think. We went away for a trip to Sydney, and one of the people within our group who none of us knew he now has a medical condition, he forgot his blood pressure medication for that trip.
Which means that you have to keep a very close eye on them.
Yes.
Which means that if he was left on his own, then there was a high chance that he could have gotten into trouble.
Yeah, exactly right.
Now, this is a little bit of a downer if this episode isn't enough of a downer for you. There are
Let's face it, Holly, the entire Wolf Creek series so far has been nothing but downers.
Pessimism after pessimism.
Yes.
Well, here you go. There are 500 unidentified bodies around Australia, either in morgues or in paupers' graves. Now, for those of you paying attention, that includes the Somerton Man.
Ugh. What episode was the Somerton Man?
I think it was episode 4.
Yeah, go back and have a listen to the Somerton Man to find out why I have such a distaste for that particular case. It will never be solved. It's very frustrating.
It might be solved. Remember the end of that episode. It might be solved some point in the next 8 months.
We'll see. We'll do a follow-up episode if it is solved.
If it happens, yeah. But yeah, in December 2016, a database was actually created to begin storing the DNA profiles of bones and remains found all over Australia. It was also created to store the DNA profiles of relatives of missing people to try and, link them up together, to try and get some of these cases solved, or at least give a few people some closure.
This is a very, very smart idea, and DNA profiling, DNA storage is something that is becoming utilized by most of the community. In a very recent case, the Golden State Killer over in America was caught through the use of a DNA database. The way he was caught was one of his relatives, a cousin, I believe, donated DNA or submitted DNA, however you want to look at it, to, I think they call it 23andMe. The Australian equivalent would be Ancestry.com. That's where you send in your DNA to find out where your DNA belongs to. But when you submit it to a company, they have all rights to your DNA in perpetuity throughout the universe. So just be careful of that. Be mindful of that. But
most of those companies also have contracts with countrywide federal police units so that things like this can actually be added into their DNA database storage, and therefore if you go missing and they can't find a relative, they can actually run you through Ancestry.com and find your great-great-grandmother was great-great-grandmother of this other person, and therefore we can start tracing back through and figure out who was missing.
Yeah, it's some pretty interesting stuff. But DNA profiling and the fact that we now have storage systems big enough to hold all of that data, and you can put it all on the cloud. Police can access it wherever they are in the country using the cloud system.
In the world.
It's pretty amazing. And I would imagine that it is going to start really reducing the numbers of identified people when they're discovered.
So on to the bit that Matthew would absolutely 100% love to discuss, and that's active serial killers in Australia. Is that about right, Matthew?
Yep. So this is a interesting one. Yeah, so this isn't a title card, but I was curious about active serial killers in Australia, and there is a little bit of a title card that I guess inspired me for this. It was, I think it's right at the end, and it just talks about the fact that the quote-unquote outback serial killer has never been caught. So we wanted to look into the validity of that. How many uncaught active serial killers are there in Australia at the moment? 0, right, Holly?
One that they don't know the identity of, and one set of cases that they're watching the suspects gathering evidence.
So only 2?
Only 2. So
it's not too bad.
Considering that one of them was active in the 80s and still hasn't been caught, which means he probably will be once one of his family members does an Ancestry.com DNA test.
Yeah, you better hope
It means
people aren't doing this, criminals. Be prepared.
it means that in Australia right now there are no identified active serial killers moving about. There are some that were active in the early 2010s that they're watching, with their last victim being 2011. Otherwise, yeah, unless you were the guy responsible for the Frankston murders in the 1980s, you know, there's no active identified serial killers out there. There are a few people who turn around on boards here and there saying, look at all these things, they could be a serial killer, but I doubt that they actually are.
The Frankston killer is particularly scary. Mr. Cruel, I think, was never caught either.
No, he wasn't, but I can't remember. He only ever went after kids, and he stopped in the 80s as well, I think.
He did. He pretty much stopped. Mr. Cruel, and you can, I mean, we might do it's a bit of a weird one, Mr. Cruel, because he did communicate with people a lot. Was that one of you two?
No, he wasn't. I've completely forgot about Mr. Cruel.
There you go. There's at least 3 active serial killers. But
not currently on a rampage, but, you know, we know of them.
The idea of this outback serial killer that has been roaming around killing backpackers, did you find anything specific to, say, Western Australia or the outback at all on that one?
No, but considering the distance, it could be possible, it could not be possible. Who's to say, really?
There's a lot of space out there, and there are a lot of people who disappear.
Yes, there are. You can't tie a serial killer together without a body or a chain of disappearances. So unless everyone disappears under the same circumstance or you start finding bodies, you have absolutely no idea.
Well, I would say that there's some hope then. Yeah, put that in the hope category.
I hope that there is, or hope that there's not.
That there's not. I don't want to run into a serial killer, Holly. I really, really would prefer not to. And I think that Australia probably has a lower amount. And people have also speculated, and I'd be curious to see what your take on this is, Holly, that because of modern technology, it is getting increasingly difficult for our environment, for our world, our society, to actually support the activities of a serial killer. And I say that not in a funny sense, like communities have never supported serial killing, but the fact that we all have a GPS in our pockets. We all have cameras. We're more surveilled than we've ever been before. There's a digital...
Facebook pictures are everywhere, so even if you steal someone might find a Facebook picture of you in the background grabbing at them, so, you know.
Yeah, there was even a case in America where there were 2 young girls that were murdered. They inadvertently took a photo of their murderer. It's a very spooky photo too. But because we are so connected these days, because we have so much technology, I would find it nearly impossible for a serial killer to rack up any sort of high body count.
Even if you transpose, say, the Golden State Killer into the modern times, there would be DNA evidence, there would be surveillance evidence. It's a point now where it's hard to get away with it because the technology to detect you is so much better. Even if they don't see you kill the first one, you will fuck up. Serial killers have been long known to be idiots.
Yeah.
They're usually crime of passion or they're crime of opportunity. They're sloppy. And unless you're dealing with a 1970s idiot cop from downtown Missouri, you are going to be caught.
Yeah. That's one of those things. Like we always entertain the notion of Hannibal Lecter-like serial killers. They very rarely exist.
Can you think of any?
The first one that comes to mind would be Ted Bundy. The only reason I say that is because he was probably more intelligent than most serial killers. For example, when he was defending himself, he was his own lawyer in his trial. The judge at the end, when he was sentencing him, said, and I quote, "I really would have liked to have seen you practice in front of me, but you went down a different path, and that's a shame." The judge was...
He basically said you'd be a good lawyer if you weren't a fucking killer.
It was pretty crazy. So Ted Bundy was pretty smart, but even he gave into these crazy berserker mode spree killings that he got into. And that's usually what happens, is though they might kill 2 in a night, and it gets rougher and rougher and more DNA evidence is left. It's just, that sort of crime is just not conducive to our society anymore. It's just like society just doesn't allow for it anymore.
It wasn't ever really conducive. It was just kind of...
Yeah, that was probably a bad word to use. But yeah, society back in the day, it just wasn't as connected. There just wasn't as much surveillance. And so, yeah, I don't think there's ever really been a Hannibal Lecter type who's super intelligent and is playing a cat and mouse game with the police. Like, there have been killers that do that. The BTK sent a letter to the police back in the day. He was caught in like 2004. He sent a letter saying, "If I send you a document on a floppy disk, can you trace me with that?" And they said no. And he sent the disk through, and then they used the metadata to trace him back to the church and arrested him.
There is one serial killer, however, who was playing a cat and mouse game and never got caught. Zodiac.
Yes. Yes, Zodiac is a particularly interesting guy. We could do an entire podcast on that if we were just doing serial killers. But we won't, because this is weird crap in Australia. And we probably have talked way too much about serial killers already. But yeah, the Zodiac, I honestly think was 2 people. I think there was a copycat, and I think there was the actual Zodiac killer. But they...
Still not caught, so...
Still not caught, and wrote cryptographs. One was cracked. None of the others were ever cracked.
I will laugh if it turns out that they were finder words.
I reckon some of those letters were gibberish and weren't able to be cracked. Yeah, we'll never know about that one. He was kind of smart. I mean, all of these people talk about such crazy shit, so whether they're intelligent or not is irrelevant. They can't function in society. I think these days, though, sadly, what society has created is the spree killer, the mass shooter, the
body count in a lot less time.
Body count in one big hit. And we've seen it all across the world too. It's not isolated to America or France or Australia. Like
Germany, Britain.
Yeah, we've all suffered from the ram raiding killers who will get into a car and they'll run over 10, 12 people. That happened down in Melbourne last year, just before, it was like 2 weeks out from Christmas. One guy with mental issues decided to hop into a car and he ended up killing, I think it was maybe 10 people. And,
including a baby in a pram.
Yeah. So I think serial killers in the outback, not so much. Spree killers in the outback, absolutely. And there was a farmer as well that committed suicide, a murder-suicide, killed his whole family and then shot himself. That only happened a couple of months ago as well. So I think that's what we're looking at as far as the new world of criminology goes.
They know they're not going to get away with it, so they're going to take out as many people as they can for...
Pretty much. Bigger is better, is quicker, and you won't get caught, and then you get your notoriety. It's just like that interconnectivity that we talked about that will help people survive a serial killer is the exact thing that is breeding spree killers, because they can get their message out there quickly and they can get their notoriety quickly. And sadly, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, they're really great for that. So, yeah, sorry, we lose one, we gain another one. That's just the way the roundabout goes, people.
It's evolution, Matthew.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to talk about the last couple of title cards in Wolf Creek. These are the ones where I actually have a bit of a gripe with, and we'll talk about these in a sec, but I'll read you the first one here. Despite several major police searches, what am I doing? Despite several major police searches, no trace of Liv Hunter or Christy Earle has ever been found. Neither of those people existed. They were characters created for the film. So that's my first little gripe. However, the truth there, again, the truth behind the Wolf Creek series, like Holly said, there are people who go missing and there are no traces of them found. So I'll give that half a pass.
Plausibility.
The next title card, early investigations into the case were disorganized, hampered by confusion over the location of the crimes, a lack of physical evidence, and the alleged unreliability of the only witness.
Gee, I know a case that sounds kind of like that one.
Yeah, so first up, location of the crimes and confusion of the location of the crimes. This happened throughout the last couple of episodes where we talked about Snowtown and we talked about the Falconio disappearance. Police had a really difficult time working out the locations of where the crimes were committed. And then the unreliability of the only witness, of course, in the movie, that applies to the only survivor in the film. But in real life, that would apply to Holly.
Joanne Lees.
From our Falconio episode, Joanne Lees was subjected to some horrible fucking media scrutiny. I talked about that in that episode. They did. They stalked her. They unraveled every little detail of her life. And they created this sensationalized story of a woman concocting this elaborate plot to get rid of her fiancé because she was unhappy in the relationship.
As opposed to just turning around and going, look, I can't do this anymore and walking away.
Yep. So there is some truth to that. And I think she was definitely a basis for our main character in that title card. After 4 months in police custody, Ben Mitchell, that's our titular character, was later cleared of all suspicion. He currently lives in South Australia. No, he doesn't, because he never existed. I can't find any parallels between that title card and real life, because Lee's left. She went back to Britain real quick once everything was sorted.
3 years is not real quick, man.
Well, 3 years relatively, like she had to stay here because it takes a long time to go through a case as complex.
Well, if the media was stalking you to the point where they had reporters on the plane back to Britain and also had reporters at the airport waiting for you to land, wouldn't you want to get the fuck out of town?
Oh, I absolutely would, but she couldn't though, didn't she she had to stay, didn't she?
No, that was after the trial. Like, after the trial, she got on her plane. There were still reporters on the plane. There were still reporters in the British airport. There were still paparazzi chasing her down the main street of London trying to get hold of her. She had to change her name, and she moved 3 times in 2 years trying to get away from them.
That's horrible. That really is. Treating a victim of crime like that is absolutely disgusting.
There was some discussion, however, of whether reporters would be charged for stalking her, but it never actually went anywhere, which is why we now have ridiculous paparazzi.
We always have had some ridiculous amount of paparazzi. I think everyone does, just because of how much money you can make if you manage to get a shot of someone wearing a revealing bikini. It's rather ridiculous. Thank you. Can I lay the blame for paparazzi on shitty entertainment magazines and tabloid newspapers?
Yes.
Yeah, stop checking out that shit. If you see a headline that says Scarlett Johansson in a thong at the beach, please don't click on that shit. It's a waste of your time, trust me. But that really wraps it up. That's the last title card. That is the last little bit of truth that we can squeeze out of this movie. And I think that's the end of our first series. Yay. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed producing it. There were moments, though, that I found hard to get through. I think what hit me...
You didn't even have to read the reports. What do you want about?
Well, I think it's just the way what I bring to the podcast, Holly. You know, gonna spruik myself here.
Charm and charisma, is that what you're going for here?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that compliment. What I try and do is to help our listeners to visualize the encounters. You know, when I was talking about Lee's, I was describing how, you know, how scary it must have been. And when you're doing that, you put yourself into their shoes. And so I think I had a little bit of trouble dealing with that, but I'll exercise the demons with some cartoons and superhero movies. So that's fine. I'll be all right.
Nothing like defeating reality with a little bit of escapism, Matthew.
Yes. I was shocked, though, to see how much real-life influence was crammed into that movie.
Well, it's billed as just one of those regular slasher flicks. Like, you don't expect them to actually go out and do some research. I'm pretty sure that the producers of Friday the 13th didn't go out and get themselves killed at a camp to check out Jason Voorhees' motivations.
Yeah, that's one little thing, too, that's seen on the IMDb trivia. Probably one last thing to wrap it up with, is that the crew apparently encountered someone very similar to Mick Taylor out there in the outback, who did approach their camp while they were filming and left them with the creeps. But they were in Wolf Creek when they were filming that bit, by the way. Yeah. Also, very, very quickly as well, Wolf Creek is not actually the spelling of... It's not called Wolf Creek, is it? Well, it kind of is.
It's pronounced Wolf Creek, but there's an E on the end of Wolf.
It's dope.
And it's Wolf Creek Crater.
Yep. It's a massive crater. But yeah, people refer to it as Wolf Creek now, I would imagine. So yeah, I think the amount of research that went into it, because at the end of the day, if you look at it from the point of view of this movie is based on true... Well, they use the term inspired, which I think is more accurate. They say inspired by true events, but they definitely try and make it feel as if there is a lot of fact in the film. My conclusion is that if you took it on its face value, then it's not true at all. There's nothing there that's even remotely true. The characters were fictitious. Mick Taylor is fictitious, and there's nothing to worry about. If you do look at it from that inspiration angle,
it becomes a lot more than a slasher film.
It does. There is a lot of shit there. Like, I think Snowtown was probably the one where we were grasping at straws a little bit, but it's still interesting enough, that story, that I think it was definitely worth telling.
It would have definitely been in their mental space when they were designing Mick Taylor, because it was something that happened very close to that time, and it was something that was in national newspapers.
Yeah, and just the method of Bunting, like his torture methods, very, very similar to what Mick Taylor gets up to. We mostly focused on the first movie. There is now 2 films and 2 series, 2 seasons of the TV show Wolf Creek, which you can watch on Stan. And if you're interested, you can listen to my review of the first season on the TV Breakdown podcast. I can't remember what episode it was. I'm going to say around 70, episode 70, somewhere like that. But I think if we were to go even further into the franchise, we could probably keep doing more episodes. We're not going to do that.
That was enough. Thank you, Vane.
Yeah, we damaged our brains more than enough doing this. But yeah, there is a lot of true life inspiration in that movie, which I think makes it a little bit more scarier on second viewing. When I watched it, trying to determine what was real and what wasn't, and what was inspired by true events, when I was watching it through that lens of, oh, this could have really happened to someone, it does make that film a little bit scarier. It makes Mick Taylor a little bit more sinister. And I think I took it a little bit more seriously when I rewatched it for this podcast. But that's it. We're done. That's the end of the series of Wolf Creek.
More serial killers for a bit, yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to do another serial killer for a while. We're going to do a couple of weird things. We've got a fun episode coming up that is going to cleanse the palate before we get into something else a little bit crazy. We've got kickboxing kangaroos, from sideshow freaks to nature and everywhere in between.
Sporting mascots and stuff like that.
Yep, the kickboxing kangaroo did exist, and he fought man. We're going to talk about that next episode. But big props go to Holly, who did an incredible amount of research for these 5 episodes. So if you're doing anything other than driving, you need to give her a clap right now. So I'll give you a little clap.
I need to go bleach my brain, okay? I have so much serial killer stuff in my brain right now.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of serial killer stuff in both our brains. So it's going to be nice to be able to let that all go. But yeah, all the research was done by Holly, and I know she put hours into it because I was sitting on the couch probably not working while she was working. So
Playing video games.
Probably. If you want to talk to us, like some of the fans of the podcast have done, to let us know about some weird shit that's happened to you or maybe someone you know, the easiest way to get in contact with us is Facebook. Just send us a direct message, and we are after anything you want to talk to us about. UFOs, Yowie sightings, some sort of monster or cryptid that we've never heard of. Send it our way because we will do our best to research it. And if we make it into a podcast, we'll definitely give you a shout out. You can also find us on Instagram. So we will leave it this week. Until then, everyone, please stay safe and be careful when venturing out into the wilderness.
The Weird Crap in Australia podcast is produced by Holly and Matthew Soul for The Modern Meltdown. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please rate and review on your favourite podcatching app.